at the Board of Estimate and Apportionment. And then, of course, we're going to take your questions. With regard to COVID, yesterday in the city of St. Louis, we had 27 new cases. So that's good because we had been running, in the 40s, mid 40s, in fact. So it's just one day down. Let's hope for more days like that. However, yesterday we did have an increase in the number of people in the hospital in the region. In fact, it was up 30 people to 296 over the day before. The hospital numbers are 2 days behind. ICU, we had 83. That's up considerably. It had been running more like 60. And on the ventilators, 44. Patients admitted yesterday, 43, discharged 49. So, we'll have to wait and see whether or not the new cases, the number of new cases stays down or not. One of the things that I mentioned to you, looking for my numbers here, on Monday, I think it was, is that we have seen that the number of days that it takes to get tests back has been running a little under 4 days, which is good. And hopefully that will continue because from the time you have a test taken till the time you get the results back, we, as you know, are recommending that you self-quarantine. And if you only have to do that for 3 or 4 days or 5 days, that's certainly a lot better than it had been a month ago when it was taking much longer to get tests back. So those are the COVID numbers for today. As a region, the pandemic task force reports, look like we're at a plateau. We've been at a plateau for a couple of weeks now. It is just, bouncing along here at very similar numbers week after week. So, so those are the COVID numbers. We'll take your questions about that as well. Did we already have one question on COVID with regard to, let me talk about this. I think we had an early question that came in on COVID, which had to do with whether or not we were seeing an increase in cases in teenagers, basically. So last week we had 12 cases in the 10 to 19 age range. The week before that, though, we had 37. The week before that, we had 35. And the week before that, we had 5. So that's about 90 cases out of a total of 318 cases. So you're looking at a little bit under 30%. It does appear that those numbers are ticking up a little bit. When you take a look at, and as you know, still the highest category is folks in their 20s, second highest category, folks in their 30s. So a little bit of an uptick also in 10 to 19 age range. We're still seeing quite a few cases in South St. Louis, 63116 zip code. In the last 14 days, so 2 weeks, had 86 cases. They are, that zip code is the 825 cases cumulatively. So that's remains the highest zip code. Then you look at 63118, 63109, 63115. Those are all pretty high number of cases. So that's COVID. We'll take your questions about that here in a few minutes. With regard to the Board of E&A, this was a special meeting today. Normally we meet once a month on the third Wednesday of the month, and we met last week, but we had a couple of items that needed to be passed that didn't get on last week's agenda, so we had a special meeting today to was on today's agenda is we appropriated $60,000, which, you know, that's not a whole lot of money. But the reason for the appropriation is so that the election board would have the flexibility to have 2 or 3 other sites other than their downtown election board where you could go and vote absentee. My office is working with the election board right now in order to help them find locations that are convenient, one north, one central, one south. It's not worked out yet, but we're still a little more than 2 months away from the election. And the idea would be that for folks who can vote absentee, which you do need a reason to vote absentee, but one of those reasons can now be that you're over 65 or that you have a health condition that would make you more susceptible to COVID. You've always been able to vote absentee for if you think you're going to be out of town on that day or whatever. So the absentee voting, we had many more people vote absentee. If my memory is correct, it was a little over 10,000, almost 11,000 people voted absentee in August. Of course, we'll have at least double that number in November because a presidential election year has a much higher turnout. So we are looking for those locations. We will need people to staff those locations, and we also need people to be poll workers. For the November election, the election board estimates that it'll take close to 1,000 people to be poll workers. And I know that some of you out there, because I've heard from some of you, have in the past maybe complained about poll workers not having enough or not being fast enough or not knowing the, and so if you think being a poll worker is important, which I certainly think it is, I hope that you will contact the election board, and we will put up a link on this feed to contact the election board. There's a phone number, but better to go online to the election board and volunteer to be a poll worker. In the August election, I'm told that we had about 600 poll workers, but we need many more than that for election day in a presidential election year. So, you know, the hours are pretty long, 6 in the morning till 7 at night, maybe a little bit on both sides of those. The pay is not very high, but, you know, consider it just part of your civic duty, if you will. If you're able to take that day off work, or maybe if you aren't working and you could be a poll worker, they give you half day of training. Of course, you got to have some training. Volunteer to be or step up. It's not volunteer; you get paid a bit, but step up to be a poll worker this November. If for those of you who think that's important, and I hope that all of you do. So what I didn't say is that we allocated this $60,000 to help find and staff these 3 absentee voting locations. The election board is hoping to be able to have those open for 2-3 weeks before the election, maybe even a little bit longer. Kind of depends on the location and ability to staff them so that people can go and vote in-person absentee there. So that, I think, was an important move that we made today at the board of E&A. And so that's all I have for today. Do we have questions?
A couple questions. We have a few folks asking when the city is going to lift the 11 o'clock bar and restaurant curfew and restrictions for capacity.
So we don't know the answer to that at this point in time. The order number 13 is supposed to be in effect for 2 more, not quite 2 more weeks. It's Monday the 7th. It may be extended because, frankly, we're not really seeing these numbers. As I said, we're sort of at a plateau. But that's not a decision that we're making right now. Right now, as you know, bars and restaurants have to close at 11. One of the things about that right now is it's a similar rule in Illinois and similar in St. Louis County. St. Louis County is a little different. They're at 10 o'clock, and that's for bars only. So, it's good for us as much as possible to try to have a consistent look at this. So hopefully, I think it would be good if we all did that at the same time, whether that's in 2 weeks or later. We have to wait for it to work. It's only been in place a week and 2 days, I guess.
So we got a question asking if the city is seeing a reduction in cases or if they're leveling off at all because of the restrictions that you implemented at bars and restaurants.
So it's hard to say what it is because of. We are not, as I mentioned it earlier on, we are not seeing a reduction in people in the hospital, people in ICU, and people on ventilators yet. Today was the first day that we saw a reduction in the number of new cases in the city. And as I mentioned, let me look, I think it was 27, wasn't it? Yes. So 27 cases yesterday. But prior to that, every day had been 44, 46, 45, 43, 45. So we'll have to wait a few more days to see if 27 is a real reduction or if we pop back up. So we need a little more runway on that in order to figure that out.
Question from Jay about masks and students. Are students in the city going to need to be able to wear their masks at private and charter schools?
Yes. Anybody who's indoors, as you know, we have a mask mandate in place, who's 9 or above is required to wear a mask. So that doesn't matter if you're at a public school, a private school, a charter school. And most of the schools, and we're in very frequent contact with the schools, most of the schools are requiring masks for even kids younger than that. There's all kinds of difficulties in terms of enforcing that. But what you have are in most of the schools in the city are mostly virtual. And I say it in that way because there are a few that are not. And St. Louis Public Schools in particular, they have about 20,000 students, a little over, and 2,200, so a little over 10% of St. Louis Public School students will attend the instructional support center. They'll still do virtual learning, but they'll do it at the instructional support center, and they will have to be wearing masks. So, mask wearing is just the norm now, whether you're in school, whether you're at work, whether you're out at a store, wherever you may be. So,
question from Tanya asking if you could provide a status update on your housing and rental assistance from the CARES Act.
Yes, Tanya, I can do that. So, as most of you probably know, if you're a regular here, we have allocated $7.4 million to mortgage and rental assistance. And we're doing that through a dozen or a little more than a dozen agencies who are helping us to process those applications. We've received over 6,000 applications. A couple thousand of those were for people who live in St. Louis County. We forwarded those applications along to St. Louis County. But we still have over 4,000. This number is a couple days old, so it's probably more than that by now. Over 4,000 folks who are seeking rental and mortgage assistance. Now, the rental and mortgage assistance applies to folks who couldn't pay their rent or mortgage, but couldn't pay their rent as a result of a COVID-related layoff, reduction in hours, reduction in income. And these various agencies are processing those for us. And there have been hundreds already processed. We are actually pulling together this afternoon from all of these agencies to give us a new update on exact numbers for each agency. So 5.4 million has already been distributed out to these agencies, and the other 2 million will be distributed out shortly. But got a good start on it. We are prioritizing people that are in the eviction process. So working with the courts to do that. Also connecting people with mediators, landlords and tenants with mediators to help work through this. Now, there are some people that are in the eviction pipeline who weren't paying their rent before March, so maybe back in December, January, February. The CARES Act money cannot be used for that. But this applies to folks that have a COVID-related drop in income causing them not to be able to pay their rent. And so we're working through that with them. And when I say we, it's us and all of our partners who are doing that. The Conflict Resolution Center has recently, I saw a recent report from them about how many people that they've contacted. They contact both the tenant and the landlord working together. So all that is really just revving up right now.
So we have other topics, Mayor, that we're getting questions about.
Okay.
Carlos's question is about the temporary restrictions on downtown traffic.
Mm-hmm.
How long should we expect
Mm-hmm.
that? And what are some more permanent ideas that you might have about improving the
Mm-hmm.
public safety of downtown?
So it hasn't even been a week. We put some temporary road closures and some narrowing down of roads to cut down on fast driving, dangerous driving. I expect that those same changes will be in effect through this weekend at least, maybe longer. This was kind of an emergency measure that we took. When you say how long will they be in place, we haven't determined that yet. We have met with some residents, some business owners. We've issued a lot of tickets. We towed 9 cars, 3 or 4 ATVs, a motorcycle. So, it's a combination of both physical changes to the streets that are of a temporary nature right now, as well as law enforcement. So those are some of the things that went into place about 5 days ago, I guess, really last Friday. And they'll stay in place for a little bit, and then we're going to reevaluate it. There's some tweaks that need to be made. Every Saturday morning, Sunday morning, every day, the team that's really working on that has had a meeting, a call to figure out what might need to be tweaked.
So Mary's question about the barricades is, how do you think that the barricade system is actually keeping people safer than they were before?
Well, Mary, I think to the extent that people can no longer drive as fast or have sort of this unfettered access to big wide roads and really go fast, do wheelies, do donuts, all those sorts of things. I mean, that's pretty dangerous behavior. And whether you're a pedestrian or you're just driving in your car, certainly that kind of behavior is dangerous. So to the extent that it's able to limit that makes it a safer situation.
We've had some positive comments and feedback, Mayor, from people saying they love that the Eads Bridge is being closed. It helps with pedestrians and bicyclists.
Mm-hmm.
What are the chances that is permanent?
I think the chances of that being permanent are not very high at all. First of all, it's a connection for our neighbors in Illinois. And there's a lot of back and forth, a lot of people in Illinois. At one time, and I don't know if this number is still good, something like 40 to 45% of the people who worked in downtown lived in Illinois. So, you've got to provide these bridges for people to get back and forth. But for right now, the Eads Bridge is closed. And we'll have to figure out how to handle that long term. But I don't think it will be permanently closed.
On other public safety matters, a few folks asking for an update on the status of the crime bill that was moving through the Missouri legislature.
So yesterday, it was yesterday, yeah. Yesterday, the Board of Aldermen, not the Board of Aldermen, let me start over on this. Yesterday, the Missouri House of Representatives passed out, I think it was 5 different bills. So the quote crime bill that was referred to originally was called Senate Bill 1. It passed through the Senate a few weeks ago. It got over to the House. The House decided to take that bill and split it, every subject, into an individual bill, which I think was probably a good idea. And they passed those bills out of the House yesterday. They passed out the bill that would lift residency, the residency requirement for public safety officers, police, fire, EMS, and anyone who's currently employed, as well as anyone who's employed in the next 3 years. They also set up a victim witness, a witness protection fund. They didn't fund it yet, but they set the fund up. That's the first step. So those were two good things that came out of that yesterday. And now that those bills will go over to the Senate, they have to go back to the Senate. The Senate, I believe, is going to take those bills up Tuesday, in about a week, not quite a week. And if they pass through the Senate without amendments, then they would go to the governor for signing. If they pass through the Senate with amendments, they have to go back to the House, and so it's not finished yet.
Question from Lindy asking if City of St. Louis is actually participating in Operation Legend like Kansas City, or just receiving federal assistance in general from additional investigators.
I don't completely understand that question, but let me tell you what we are doing. We have about 50 additional federal agents from various federal agencies that are working in coordination and collaboration with our police department to solve crimes, to make arrests, and to work on the most violent crimes. So we are participating they are participating with us as part of the team in order to really tackle the violence that we've had in our city. And today, as of today, we had, I think, 174 homicides. Is that the right number?
That sounds right.
And it was 40 more than we had last year at this time. So we all know that this violence in our community and cities across the nation, but this violence in our community is devastating for the families, the friends, neighbors, our entire community. And so really having the additional assistance from federal agencies. We always have assistance from federal agencies, but this is 50 additional folks from federal agency is helpful and in helping us tackle violence.
Mayor, follow-up question about the residency requirement from Mark. In regards to when the city talks about being 140 or so officers short, where does that number come from, and when does the external review begin of the St. Louis City Police Department?
So two different questions. The city budget calls for 1,342, I think is the number, 1,342 officers. That's what's in the TO. Today we have about 1,200. So we are 143 today officers short of having a full TO. So that's where that number comes from. That number has been pretty consistent for 5 years, 6 years. Now, sometimes it's at 120. We actually have a police graduation next week, next Thursday night. And so we'll graduate. Last time I looked, I think it's 29 young people into the probationary officers. So it does go up and down a little bit, but right now we're 143 officers short. And recruiting is a problem for law enforcement agencies across the country. And we have high standards for our police department. So we believe that by being able to expand the geography which we can recruit from, just like every other police department in our entire region, we will have more folks to apply to be officers.
Probably our last question for the afternoon. It comes from January regarding the election. Might you be able to thank U.S. Postal Service workers, Mayor, for all they're doing to help with the election this fall?
Great prompt. Thank you for reminding me to do that. I mean, I think a week or so ago, maybe 2 weeks ago now, I think my comment was, God save the post office. And thank you so much to all of the postal workers who deliver our mail day in and day out. You know the saying, rain, sleet, snow, through all kinds of weather, and are so important to our democracy and to our election process. The last thing that I intended to say at the start and didn't is that today, some of you know this, today is the centennial of the 19th Amendment being certified to go into place. So here's to Women's Equality Day today. So for all of us women out there who are such an important part of our country and our electorate, it seems almost impossible that it would only have been 100 years ago. But so happy centennial of the 19th Amendment, Women's Equality Day. Thank you all, and thanks to the Post Office.